I'm Scott Elmo. It's the 24th of September, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Nicaragua. Today, we are watching the procession of the patron saint of the city of Leon, and we're getting to watch from the park in Calvario. So this is a completely different vantage point in the city than we normally are in, and we got offered to go up there, and there was a balcony that we were able to use. So I was able to set up tripod with the Olympus up on the balcony and get a shot of a lot of the parade going through, so you can actually see the parade. This is pretty unique because it's difficult to see the processions that are at night, and we have a good camera that can handle the low light pretty well, and we had a good vantage point. So it's still pretty hard to see because it's pretty dark. But this is such a unique thing that happens here in Nicaragua and in each of the cities, and it's such a thing that you're just not going to experience other places. So I wanted to bring this to you, and we're going to be watching quite a bit of that today. We're going to get to that right after the bump. Processions are a big thing here in Nicaragua. You get them for every season, every event, really just all the time. Some are religious, we call those processions, and then others are secular, we call those desfile. In most cases, it really means parade, but a procession is really a parade too, so it's all stuff we're not used to in the US, the way that, or Canada or wherever, that the way that people move through the streets and do these kind of moving parties, whether more somber like a religious one or more exciting like a secular one, and in some cases they overlap, and sometimes even the religious ones get a little bit nuts. So this one that we're going to show, this is the parade of what they say here is La Virgen de Mercedes, which is Our Lady of Mercy, more or less, as translated. So this is the patron saint specifically of Leon, as I don't know what you say, ordained, consecrated, determined in 1912. And I'm gonna be honest, this is kind of a really boring procession. If you are a local or you are incredibly religious, there's probably a lot more excitement to this. Basically, this starts at one of the churches, and I honestly don't know which church it starts at. I wasn't able to determine that from the events of the day, and I've seen this procession more than once, but I really don't know where it starts. It goes past Calvario, it heads to the Basilica, but I don't think it starts at the Basilica, but I really don't know where it starts, especially given where we were and where it was coming from, like really confused. But in the northeastern section of El Centro, just north of the park at El Calvario, Iglesia El Calvario, the procession comes from the east, but it's been going for hours by the time it gets there. So this is a big, long procession, and as it comes by, it slowly stops and turns and faces the church at El Calvario and does this thing. So it moves through the streets. Well, let's just cut to it so you can see it as I'm talking. It moves through the streets incredibly slowly in a massive crowd. This is the thing that's most amazing, and the reason that you would come out to potentially see one of these processions if you are not a Leonesa or you are not incredibly religious, but you want to see what's going on. First of all, it's a major community activity. It's at night. There's not much else going on. It's a Sunday night, right? So, I mean, obviously there's always things going on. It's Nicaragua. It's a going out kind of country, but there's nothing else on this scale going on a Sunday night for sure. And for us, we got invited to go out for it. We were told ahead of time, so our friends here are like, oh, you know, there's a big procession tonight, might want to go film it or whatever. We're like, we always get those little bits of announcements, right, from people who are like, yeah, go film something. But we got invited to a friend's house, and a lot of people do this, right? They throw like a party because they live near the route, and they had, you know, many people, I don't know, a couple dozen people over at their house drinking, right? They got bottles of rum, beer. People are like really drinking, like it's a house party. And then as the procession gets really close, everybody just grabs a beer or whatever, goes out to the street and watches the procession go by, which still takes several hours. So it's a big thing. They make a day out of it. I'm not exactly sure why, but it's what you do here, right? Like it's a thing. And it was really interesting just to kind of, you know, more than in past years, we're so much more a part of the community now, and that's great, right? So we're getting invited out by Nicaraguans who, you know, want us to participate and hang out with them, and you know, we have lots of really good friends, and it's a fun community and friends and family event, and And, you know, more than anything, I think it's an excuse for everybody to get together and you have a thing to watch. So, like, it gives a structure to going out and doing stuff. So that, I think, was really cool. And then we spent quite a bit of time hanging out on a balcony. I had a really good vantage point with the camera to be able to film the event and really get a pretty good shot of it, I think, at least a different shot kind of from above with a good camera. I hope that it turned out pretty well and you get kind of a feel for what this procession was like. What's interesting about this one, and a lot kind of have these aspects to them, but nearly every procession has representation from the colegios, from the high schools. And so groups will come by with banners from their high school and they will, in this procession, very somberly march through. In others, they come in like dancing uniforms, or they do like shows, or, you know, play music. It varies a lot depending on the procession. This one was very low key, but you still had these high schools coming through. But they come through potentially hours before the main procession, and there's these giant gaps in between. And like all parades, processions, whatever, here in Nicaragua, there are just loads of people who move along with the procession through the streets, which is interesting and different. And it makes, for people who want to participate, that pretty much everyone has the ability to participate if they want to, right? Which is cool. But it's also kind of complex, right? That like you can't figure out what exactly is going on, because you will have like a high school group go through, but mixed in with them are a bunch of probably parents or aunts and uncles or who knows, younger siblings, and then random people, and then sometimes people selling things, and it's so mixed together you can't often tell exactly what is the procession and what is just people milling about and what is people marching with the procession, but not officially in any capacity, just walking with it because they want to see it as it moves rather than stationary. That's one of the weirdest things, is the seeing from a North American perspective where viewers are stationary and the parade moves past you. And here, easily half or more of the people watching a procession are moving with it, whether it's a parade or a procession. Like, it's just the crowd moves and like you go as a drove through the streets, but you still have the people on the side who are stationary watching all those people go by. So it's very different for us, very dynamic and confusing and wild. But one of the things that's so interesting about this is just looking at how long the parade route was and how many people were moving with the route and how many people were on the street. Easily 50,000 people were out for this procession on a Sunday night in Leon, a city of only 300,000 people. That suggests, based on my really rough math, that about 1 out of every 6 inhabitants of the metro area was on the street, either moving with or watching the procession. That feels insane, right? That's an unbelievable number of people to be doing that. But there's times where you see the street and it is just as many people wide as you can fit in the street, and all the way down the street just moving with the procession. And so what happens is these groups come by, and sometimes a band will come by, and sometimes it's a high school, sometimes it's something else, and then eventually the priests or the monks and the nuns, they start coming by, and then you get the actual giant float. And this is the thing that you picture from a lot of, say, American media showing pictures of religious processions in Central America. You get these enormous effigies of, in this case, the Virgin Mary on a float. And that float is my crazy dog, is not being carried by a vehicle. It's being carried by people carrying the float on their shoulders. So the float, and maybe float's the wrong word, but it seems like it's floating, right? More than one with wheels. It really gives a floating impression. It's swaying back and forth as it comes through the streets, and there's huge lights on it, and there's these shrines that are set up along the route, and this giant effigy of Mary will stop at these different shrines, big shrines, right? Shrines that are 2-3 stories tall, and they'll like do some thing at this shrine, and then they'll slowly turn and proceed down the route. And so it takes forever as they do this. And there's crazy loud music in the procession, and there's crazy loud music stationary along the route. So it's this moving music going through other music, which is very weird. And then, especially when they got to where we were, after they turned and faced the church for a little bit, then suddenly just loads of fireworks go off, and there's flaming fireworks falling onto this crowded street, people trying to get out of the way of the remains of the fireworks coming down, and it's completely wild, and it's super loud and flashing, and the music and the smoke and the moving lights of the procession and the lights of the shrines, and just there's so much going on. It is an overwhelming sensory experience, which is something to say because you're out there for hours. So in some ways, you're really pushing your limits for boredom, while at the same time having an overwhelmingly sensory thing where you're just like, what, there's so much going on all of a sudden, and then it's all over, and then you head home. It was really interesting. We had a nice time. It was fun to go out with friends. Obviously, we loved being able to hang out with people. We really appreciate that we were able to film and get the position that we did. So we're gonna keep it short today, but I'm glad we got to bring that to you. It was definitely an interesting cultural experience. I don't know that I would say come to Nicaragua and make a point of seeing the processions, but certainly if you're going to be living here, at some point I would recommend you take the time and do some of these things just to have kind of a better appreciation for Nicaraguan life or whatever. And of course, if you are visiting and this is something you find interesting, as odd or unlikely as that might be, certainly take a moment. These things do go on around the country all the time. You can nearly always find one if that's what you're looking for on any given weekend, right? There's so many municipalities throughout the country, as there is in most countries, and they all have a foundation holiday or a patron saint on a different weekend, or whatever. It makes it pretty easy to find some type of procession that you could check out and just see what it's all about. Obviously, smaller cities. This is one of the biggest cities in the country and one of the more religious cities in the country. Places like Managua, it's much more difficult to have religious processions on this scale for the city, and smaller cities just don't have the crowd. So León kind of falls into a perfect place to be if you want to see a massive scale religious procession of this nature, where the whole community can focus on a single procession. And it's much like the Ipico. The Ipico is very different in León than it is in Managua. Obviously, in Managua it's bigger, and in Managua it's always secular, so it's a very different vibe, but you still have a certain community feeling to the one in León that in Managua it's more like a giant party that people are visiting and no one feels like it's your community. But in León it's like, this is our community horse dancing event, right? So just different feel. As always, like and subscribe. Take a moment to share on social media, tell people about the show. I don't have Facebook, so if you're on Facebook, absolutely post that for me. I would appreciate it. Get down in those comments, let me know what you think of the show, and I will see all of you tomorrow.